What is up, Bitcoin miners? So today we are here in the studio. I'm your host, Trevor Bello, and I'm here with none other than RevHodl. RevHodl is someone that I've been wanting to have on the show for a while now. I first learned of Rev in the Loki board group chat on Telegram when I was trying to build my Loki rig. Rev is Rev's a different type of person. He's a different type of human altogether, man. Like he's out there living on his farm, building some really cool building really cool devices with Bitcoin miners that are helping him live like a more holistic life. I like to think of him as like a renegade out in the regenerative agriculture section of life. So he's out there, he's building stuff for his farm. He's just putting it together, DIYing, doing some crazy stuff. It doesn't look beautiful, but it does work. And it's pretty insane the way that he's doing it. Some of the coolest things that he's built that I want to dive more into is he actually built a sap purifier or reverse osmosis sap purifier, turning, tree sap into syrup. And he uses the Bitcoin miner to heat the syrup or the sap up before it goes into the reverse osmosis stuff. Like, I don't know the whole system, so we'll talk to him about it, but it's using the Bitcoin miner to help speed up that process and make it more effective and efficient. He also built a rehabilitation center tank container for a lamb. So, if in a situation when you're a farmer, if you have a lamb or a calf or, animals that are sickly or in need of more help than others, you might want to be able to put them in a warmer environment so that they've got the ability to grow and get healthy and all that stuff. So it's really cool what he's doing, and I want to talk to him some more about that. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about the MasterMINED group. This podcast is brought to you by the MasterMINED Club, the best way for aspiring miners to get a foothold in the world of Bitcoin mining. Join a supportive community of like-minded individuals who meet weekly to share insights, exchange ideas, and provide mutual encouragement on the exhilarating journey of Bitcoin mining. As a member, you'll gain access to our monthly deep dive sessions, which dive into a wide range of technical topics such as heat management, site optimization, electrical infrastructure, and so much more. Don't worry, as a member, you also get access to our back catalog of deep dives so you can catch up with the rest of the group. You can acquire the knowledge, the skills necessary to navigate the complexities of mining operations with confidence and ease. What is it that sets us apart? In addition to our group dynamic value add, our members get personalized one-on-one sessions with Bitcoin Mining World's team, industry veterans who are ready to offer tailored guidance and support. Plus, you'll gain the opportunity to connect directly with Scott himself. Our members also gain privileged access to pre-sales, minimum order quantities from Bitcoin Mining World. Secure your place in the ever-evolving world of Bitcoin mining with insider opportunities reserved exclusively for our club members. Whether you're a budding enthusiast eager to explore the world of mining or a current miner seeking to expand your operations and stay ahead of the curve, our MasterMINED Club is your partner in success. Join the MasterMIND community today and let us help you on your Bitcoin mining journey. Go to theminingworld.com or go to bitcoinminingworld.com or scan the QR code on your screen today. Anyways, let's bring up RevHodl. Welcome to the Bitcoin or the Build a Mine podcast.
Hey Trevor, good to talk with you again.
Yeah, it's good to have you here, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. The last time we talked, we were on your permaculture conversation on Nostr. We talked a lot about your life out on the farm and what you're doing with regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, I got a 20-acre homestead here that I have managed to find a lot of ways to integrate Bitcoin mining into. But the main thing that we do here is we host guests at our Airbnbs. I've got a 20-foot yurt, a 20-foot tiny house rental. And then we're also starting to do some classes in the fall here, October 12th. Saturday, October 12th, we're going to be doing a class, permaculture class, and that there's going to be some Bitcoin content involved in that as well. But the homesteading lifestyle is going great. I really am happy that I found Bitcoin mining because it's really kind of supercharged a lot of the systems we have here. And I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit more as we talk.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely want to talk about your life out on the homestead. I think before we do all of this, for anybody that hasn't, I know you have a lot of videos out with other podcasters, other YouTubers. Let's just kind of give people a breakdown of like how you found Bitcoin and like what was that catalyst to you seeing Bitcoin mining as a way to integrate into your homestead life?
Well, how I found Bitcoin, or really, I guess there's this saying, right? You get many touch points before you finally actually take the dive down the rabbit hole, you could say. And that was the case for me. I'd heard about Bitcoin a few times here and there. But when the crash happened in March of 2020, I was meditating, and I just sat up from the meditation. I thought, check the price of Bitcoin. And I hadn't really thought about Bitcoin or anything like that. It seemed kind of random. And I looked at the price, and it was pretty low relative to where it had been. And to me, that seemed like the time to start to figure things out. And I had already been kind of looking into gold and other stuff. And so Bitcoin just made a lot of sense right away. And I started participating in meetups and just kind of slowly going pretty much all in Bitcoin. And at the same time, I had been building up this yurt and had a solar power system on the yurt. I was interested in, because the batteries would be topped off on sunny days, and I would essentially be just throwing the power away. And commonly when you have extra solar power on a homestead or something like that, you use the extra power from your solar panels to do something like pump water, fill a pond, fill up a water tank, water tower, whatever it might be. Well, I didn't have any pump or any reason to do that at the time. And as I was learning about Bitcoin, it seemed like Bitcoin mining was an obvious application to soak up some of that extra power. So I just happened to get in touch with John, who does the Pleb Miner monthly Ungovernable Misfits podcast with Max. And I just somehow got into a conversation with him about if he had an idea about how I could integrate Bitcoin mining into this solar power setup. Now, at the time, and I think this is where Bitcoin mining can be a little bit, it can seem intimidating. I think the general narrative, and this might be changing a little bit now, but back then it was that Bitcoin mining at home isn't worth it. It's not profitable. It's too difficult. There's a lot of FUD around it, basically.
Yeah.
To me, I was fairly intimidated, and I thought it was a difficult thing to do and incorporate. Anyways,
I think a lot
John,
of people end up feeling that way about Bitcoin mining at the very beginning.
it seems intimidating, and it's, I mean, after you do it, take those initial first steps, it becomes honestly very trivial and simple for the most part. But so I was looking for somebody to essentially hold my hand and help me figure this out. And so John got me in touch with another fellow pleb miner, Chet, and Chet's done he's doing amazing work, really helping a lot of people he didn't just help me get started in Bitcoin mining. He helps dozens and dozens of people get going. And he's excellent at teaching people how to start mining. Chet hooked me up with an S9. We did a little value for value trade for that S9. And so here I was hashing away off the solar power at my yurt. And there were still some things that that weren't quite obvious right away about how to use this thing. But over time, and one burned up control board later, right? You make some mistakes here and there. You don't know what you don't know, but ultimately, especially if you're playing around with something like an S9, you could beat those things up and find replacement parts and find, especially once you get tied in with more of the pleb mining community, these home miners, everybody's kind of got access to some spare parts and things like that. And everybody seems to be pretty interested in helping each other out. This open source movement, so on and so forth, right? We just want to get the ball rolling.
Everybody's out there to help each other. I've noticed that a lot in some of the group chats that I'm in, just needing, if I need something or if I need help with something, I'm just like, hey, and I type it in there. Even in the Loki chat, where we found each other at the very beginning, is I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to build this thing. And some of the descriptions, like the breakdown videos, were kind of confusing to me. So I asked some questions, and you'd be surprised at just how many people were just like, oh, you need to do this. Oh, this is what you're doing wrong. This is how it works. And so it makes it a lot easier for people who don't know what they don't know to step into the world of Bitcoin mining and heat reuse.
Yeah, it really, as soon as you start finding a community where you can ask some questions to people, it really makes things a lot less intimidating. Because it is kind of, as much as there's content about Bitcoin around, there's a million Bitcoin podcasts now, YouTube channels, so on and so forth. There really seems to be not a ton going down the specific rabbit hole of the technical aspects of mining. And honestly, if there's somebody out there that wants to make some videos and content around that, I think that would be very popular and useful. But anyways, I'm not doing that. I don't have time.
Well, that's kind of what we're trying to do here on the Build a Mine podcast is, a lot of it so far has been talking about Bitcoin mining just in a general sense. But I really do want to start diving into more of the technical topics and like the how-tos. And hopefully we can kind of dive a little bit into that here on this one. I'd like to, in the future, maybe have you on again so that we can dive even further into the technical topics. Today is probably just going to be more of like an overview of what you have built and how that has helped you. But anyways, continue. My bad.
I don't consider myself to be an expert on the technical aspects of things. I just fuck around and find out, so to speak. And a lot of times when I make a mistake, thankfully I have a group of people that I can reach out to and be like, I don't know what's going on here. Just as an aside, this is kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but I just recently, so the Lake Satoshi event just happened up in Lanesburg, Michigan. Excellent event, totally like 100% real pleb style Bitcoin event. And so there was an auction for S19K Pro 115 terahash, but it was modified with the Loki chip for 110 from Altair Tech. He calls it the Erlacher. So I was at the event. My goal is to sell some stuff for sats there. So I sold as much stuff as I could, and I ended up with a few sats, and I put a bid on this Erlacher, and I won it. So I came home and I was like, this will be a perfect upgrade to my solar power setup. Right now I'm just running a S19J Pro 96 terahash, and I'm only running 2 boards off of that with my current setup. One of the boards has failed, probably because I abuse my miners. I put them in difficult and harsh conditions and expect them to continuously perform. But so I upgraded the solar setup, but there was a problem. I could plug this new Erlacher, this new S19K Pro into the wall at my house on grid power, run just fine. Everything worked. As soon as I plug it into the solar power setup, it trips my breaker immediately. So this is something I couldn't really figure out. And so I reached out to the group, and just through talking it out with the group, I was able to troubleshoot it and basically found out that if I just try swapping the power supply, because I've got all these other APW3++s laying around, maybe that would work, and that solved my problem. And so that's just another example of like when something doesn't work, you having access to these people to even just like talk through your problem. Just the act of me talking through it led me to find the solution that now has got me up in hashing. And the big thing you might realize over time with Bitcoin mining is like, if you get that Bitcoin miner, if it's not plugged in and hashing and doing whatever you got it for right away or as soon as possible, that's leaving sats on the table, because we're looking at a window of 4 years here of this new halving epoch, right? It just got started. So now it's our opportunity, if you got hash, to figure out ways to get that hash rolling, because this is the window of time that you've got before your rewards get cut in half again. And so this is the game that we play. We're always trying to get plugged in, no downtime, get rolling right away. So troubleshooting and keeping your machines up and running is really important.
And that specifically is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on today, because there's this whole idea that home mining is not going to work out. It's not conducive to the whole mining atmosphere. Like, home miners are just not going to make it. But I think that people need to realize that Bitcoin mining is not just, you don't just need to take a machine and plug it in and just leave it. I think that what you're doing specifically by tying the heat, the Bitcoin miners, into things that you're already doing to make that process faster and easier, or more effective or efficient, is going to save you a lot more money and probably produce more sats in the long run than you would have otherwise. And so when people understand that taking something that you're already doing and applying a Bitcoin miner into that process, you're going to stack more sats. And I think that is where the pleb miners, the home miners, become more, I don't know if competitive is the right word, because you're never going to be able to compete with the giant pubcos and the industrial miners, but definitely going to start producing more KYC free sats, and building up something that's for you and yours.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, to that point, well, I call it giving my miner a job. So if I've got, I usually buy a miner with the intended purpose of it doing a particular task for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, well, I just bought another. So, okay, let me back up. Sorry, I'm losing my.
All good.
I have a Bitcoin mining clothes dryer, right? I cut a hole in the back of the drum of my clothes dryer. I connected some ductwork to that, and I just very roughly attached a Bitcoin miner to it with some stuff I could get at the hardware store. That whole setup, all the ducting and all this stuff, was like less than $100 to convert my clothes dryer into one that mines Bitcoin when I dry my clothes. And like I said, I have all these Airbnbs, all this laundry, so I can run my dryer for 10 hours a day easy, which is great. And so at first I was using this Avalon miner. It was a cheap miner. Just this is the other thing I do. I try and buy these cheaper units at first, maybe less efficient, whatever, but I'm risking less sats by proving, when I'm just proving the concept, right? Mm-hmm. So I build the proof of concept with an S9 or a cheaper miner. In this case, I needed a big one because I need a lot of heat, right? Clothes dryer, you have the 220 there, so I needed a lot of heat. So this Avalon was perfect for that. Over the course of a year, I proved that it worked, and the Avalon mined all the sats back that I paid for it and more. Granted, I'm not taking into account the cost of the power that I've been using. I just assumed that I would be using that power anyways because I need to dry the laundry with electricity. So I've in my mind ROI'd right on this Avalon, so I can retire that and upgrade it into an S19. So I upgrade into this S19, and now my clothes dryer is, I don't know, 40% more efficient. I'm getting this rebate in sats for the usage of the electricity for drying my clothes. And over time, I've gone from a proof of concept stage into upgrading into more efficient hash, which now I can be confident that this works, and I'm really, hashing away. I mean, getting 40% more stats or whatever it is a big deal when you upgrade the efficiency like that.
Absolutely. I want to hear more about this project and some of the other projects, but before we do that, I'd like to kind of know or learn a little bit more about the homesteading life. How did you get into homesteading? Did you know a little bit about homesteading, or was it kind of something that you just you bought a piece of land and you said, I'm going to do this, and you just kind of trial by fire went through the steps as you go?
I had no experience homesteading. I was kind of handy. I built skate ramps and stuff. I knew how to use power tools and skill saw and all that. But I hadn't really ever effectively grown a significant portion of my own food, or really operated heavy equipment or anything like that, right? Never drove a tractor. But I did spend several years learning about permaculture, learning about this, I guess you could call it prepping or sovereignty, building your own sovereignty in your lifestyle, before I took the dive into purchasing the property and building it out.
Okay.
So a little bit of both, right? I kind of threw myself into it, but not totally blind. I had built up some idea in my mind that I had confidence from this knowledge that I was building up, this intellectual capital, that I could turn it into the experiential capital that I needed to operate everything. And so I've been doing that for like 10 years now. And I'm not just getting started anymore, but at the same time, I've got a long way to go before I'm like completely 100% food independent, 100% energy independent. You know, I'm not quite there yet. You just take little steps at a time. Every year it's a little bit better. You learn a little bit more. You have your systems are built and you're refining them a little bit more, and you're building new ones, and the process, it grows just like a forest. In nature, it's just an evolving ecosystem that I'm dancing with here.
Yeah, it's, you know, I always tell people when I'm telling them about Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining, is this is a marathon and not a sprint. You just like the blockchain, you're taking little blocks of knowledge and information, education, and you're stacking it on top of itself, and you're just kind of reiterating the things over time. You know, we talked a little bit before about how reaching out to people to hold your hand and help you along the way is very sustainable, or maybe not sustainable is not the right word, but it's very effective to get the information that you need. And it's kind of the same thing in this situation with the homesteading. Is like you didn't know what you didn't know, but you did take the dive, having a basis, a foundation of information before you dove into buying your property. But then once you bought that property, you start learning from trial and error. You know, you do this thing, it doesn't work, so you do this other thing, it works better. Maybe there's still another more effective way, so you try that. Hey, look, that works, let's go with that route. And it's just an iterative process over and over and over again, until you get to the point where you're like, okay, now I can grow my own food. Now I can, regenerate the land in ways, shapes, and forms. Like we talked on the permaculture show that you were doing, how you're using a lot of the animals like that you're growing, you're raising, but they also use like the manure to make the soil healthier for certain plants. But you're also using those animals to, eat the grass or eat this plant that you don't want. Basically what you're doing is you're just trying to find out what works, and that process can be used in Bitcoin mining as well, in the pleb side of things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you nailed it, man. It's so I give my animals a job. So, but my animals are doing a job for me, but they're also producing some sort of yield, in the form of the eggs in the chicken, the meat from the rabbits or the sheep that I'm raising, or the milk from the sheep that I have. And like you're saying, the chickens, their job is to compost my horse manure and to eat the fly larvae out of there to help my horses have less fly pressure, and for me to do less work turning that manure into compost, and then I can just go and use it. The rabbits that I have, they help weed and fertilize my cannabis, and then actually I can feed some of that cannabis to my rabbits, and I still get meat out of the deal, and I'm able to sell the cannabis seed.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Bitcoin mining, I mean, related to the cannabis, I actually I use a Bitcoin miner to heat this little cold frame that I grow my cannabis starts in the early spring, late winter. So I'm earning some Bitcoin to grow the cannabis initially. Then I'm using my rabbits to help me grow that cannabis, which are then feeding me and my family the meat. And then I take the seed from that cannabis and I turn around and I go on Nostr or on Telegram or wherever, and I sell the cannabis seed for Bitcoin. And now I'm earning some Bitcoin as well. And so all of the systems, whether it's Bitcoin mining or food production, aid in helping me produce a product that I can then earn Bitcoin with, and then I can take that Bitcoin, spend it on another Bitcoin miner, and the cycle repeats. And this is, it's like a little miniature economy here on the homestead itself. And this is the principles and ethics of permaculture are what I use as the guiding framework for me to come up with all this stuff. It's not like I have some crazy brain that I can figure this all out on my own. I'm just leaning on permaculture to inform me on how to do it.
Yeah. I think a big hurdle or roadblock for a lot of people is that, you talk about how like you're not the most educated, or you're not quote unquote the smartest guy in the room. There's a lot of people think, oh, because I'm not the smartest guy or I don't know what I'm doing, then I'm just not going to try. And I think that's like where a lot of people stop when, you know, you get over the first hurdle of, oh, I don't know anything. Okay, sure, you don't know anything, but like go out and find somebody that does. You know, part of this podcast is talking to people such as yourself that know more than I do. And I can learn how you've implemented these processes into your lifestyle. And then I think about my own life and I'm like, okay, well, how can I implement things into my own life? Like me personally, I don't live on a homestead. So obviously I'm not going to be using rabbits and, you know, sheep and chickens to make my life a little bit easier or wholesome by having all these food sources and stuff like that. But what I do have is I do have a clothes dryer. You know, everybody in the nation's got a clothes dryer. So how can I learn from you how you did your clothes dryer? How can I learn how to make my own clothes dryer? And then we, you know, I've got things like hot water heater, or, you know, maybe I want to build a sauna, those kinds of things. So you look at your own life versus like the life of somebody else that you're talking to, and you learn the processes that can make it easier. And it's just getting over that first hurdle to then realize, hey, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm going to learn things in an iterative process. And 2 years from now, I'll know a lot more than I did then.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take the combination of building up the intellectual capital, right? Just gathering this information from people available, knowing your own aptitudes, and then using the, you know, building that experience to then get the feedback and reapply it and iterate like you're talking about. It comes to this idea that I've been working on. I gave this presentation at the Grand Rapids Bitcoin meetup. I call it the principles of home mining. And so this kind of gets to the idea of like, yeah, you might not have all the same ways and options to use a Bitcoin miner as me at home, because you don't have this homestead where there's all these different use cases for the heat. But if you understand that there's some principles in home mining that you can use your own aptitudes, your experiential capital, and your intellectual capital to apply them to, then you might find different creative ways that I haven't even thought of to use these Bitcoin miners to do some work for you too. And so that comes to the first principle, which is use the heat or do some work, give your miner a job. That's fairly obvious at this point. We've talked about that a lot. But the next principle, and this is where people can get in trouble, is when you're trying to price out your build, it's important, I think, to denominate the cost of all the auxiliary equipment that you might need in sats, because that's ultimately what you're trying to accumulate at the end of the day. So if you don't think about the fact that how many sats is this costing you, even though you're paying $4, you could have just bought Bitcoin with that instead. So you got to denominate the auxiliary stuff in sats. And so this leads to the next principle, which is use what you have first, because if you already have something laying around that you might be able to use to develop one of these contraptions or systems in Bitcoin mining, that's going to save you some stats. And like you were saying at the beginning, my stuff doesn't look the prettiest, but that's because I'm following this principle of trying to scrounge together any piece of junk that I've got that I might use to aid me in this process so I can spend less stats getting that proof of concept going. And I'll refine that, once again, iterating over time to improve it. Maybe make it a little bit prettier, maybe make it a little bit quieter, so on and so forth, so that it becomes something that my friends and family can come over and be like, wow, that's pretty cool, instead of what the heck is that thing? That looks like a junk.
You're not, this is the thing that people need to realize. You're not selling a product. You're building something to use in your life that makes your life easier. So it doesn't have to be beautiful. I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about this later. I want you to finish the principles of home mining. So I'll just be really fast, but your purification process for your tree stack. You've got this bare bones setup of an S9 hash board in a plastic tub of canola oil. It doesn't look beautiful. It's not this aluminum, high grade, high quality tank with a nice, beautiful pump on it. It's just the bare bones, slap it together and see if it works kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That was me. That was a perfect example of me using what I had first. If I went out and, well, first of all, I didn't know if any of that was going to work. So that was the first iteration, right? I'm going to make maple syrup again this coming late winter, early spring. And maybe this second iteration will have something a little bit more substantial for a tank. I do plan on upgrading from an S9 board once again to an S19 to get a little bit more hash out of it. We'll talk about that. But so the next is so these Bitcoin miners, when you get an S9, even an S9, even though you can plug it into the wall at home and everything, it runs on 110 volts, 120 volt, whatever you want to say. they're ultimately designed to be sitting on a rack with 1,000 other of them next to each other in a big facility. They're not meant to be a space heater or a clothes dryer or whatever you want to apply this, whatever work you want them to do. They weren't designed to do that work. And so you have to be willing to tinker, experiment, and customize your miner in order to achieve the goals that you want with it. You can't be afraid to like take it apart and mess with it a little bit. And you obviously don't need to, the first thing you need to do, when you get a Bitcoin miner, you don't need to first thing do, just take it all apart and mess with it all. But just understand that if you do have the confidence to take it apart and mess with it a little bit, you're going to get a lot more versatility and functionality out of that miner. That leads me to another principle, which is don't sleep on the third-party firmware. Third-party firmware will allow you, and under modifications like the Loki chip and things like that, will allow you to really modify these miners to, instead of being in this rack situation with 1,000 others, being malleable to the job that you're trying to give it. And so there's another thing too. A lot of people that talking about third-party firmware, a lot of times the third-party firmware will give you this efficiency rating or this power output reading on the firmware. And from my experience, and people say there's disagreement about this, right? Some people say, oh, when I check the power at the wall, you know, you actually take your meter and measure your breaker or whatever, or you check the power on the firmware, they match up pretty close. In my experience, the power at the wall is very different than the power consumption at the firmware. And that's usually because I'm either drastically underclocking the miners, or in the case of the maple sap, I'm drastically overclocking it. So measure the power at the wall. That's another principle. Start small and scale up. And I've talked about this already with I'm going to upgrade from an S9 to an S19 for my maple sap production. Same with my clothes dryer. I've started off with a smaller, cheaper miner. Well, I wouldn't say smaller, but a cheaper miner. And I'm upgrading into something that's a little bit more efficient, a little bit more expensive, taking a little bit more risk there. But I proved that the concept was working first rather than going all gung-ho right out the gate. You just want to try and mitigate your risk, because once again, we only have 4 years to get these contraptions to work and do some work for us, to maximize the amount of stats we can earn with them in that window. Granted, as time goes on, I'm always going to be drying my clothes with a Bitcoin miner now. And if the rewards get cut in half, I don't really, it's still going to be some rebate on the power that I'm using. The same thing could be true of a S9 that you're using as a space heater in your basement. You're always going to get some sats out of it. And the great thing is too, now that there's lightning withdrawals on these pools, you can get that 1 sat or 2 sats or trickle. You can let that build up to just a small stash rather than wait for 500,000 sats or 100,000 sats. You can just withdraw it on lightning. But that kind of leads me to another principle, which is, and this might not be a principle, but this is just a strategy that I employ. The Bitcoin that I mine, the withdrawals that I get from my mining pool are the last sats that I intend to spend. And I live on Bitcoin, so I'm always spending sats. I earn a lot of Bitcoin and I spend a lot of Bitcoin, but the stuff that I mine, it's got lower transaction history. You can follow the withdrawal to the Coinbase payout, and usually it's within a few hops. It's very low transaction history Bitcoin. I think that it's valuable than Bitcoin that you would get from a lightning payout, let's say from your pool. So I'm spending those sats last. And should I have to spend the sats, this is another principle, I would like to keep the sats within my local Bitcoin community. I'm not looking to send those Bitcoins to an exchange and sell them for dollars there. I would like to spend them peer-to-peer, either buying something that I need with Bitcoin or selling them for cash to somebody that wants those sats within my local community. Keep the sats local. Do you have anything to add to any of these so far?
I've got a lot of things to add. Honestly, I wanted to let you get through the principles of mining first before I started just going off on all these tangents. So if you still have a couple more principles, let's go over those first.
There's a couple more. And really, actually, it's just one more.
Okay.
And that is challenge the status quo. So once again, there seems to be this idea that, and maybe if you're new to Bitcoin or new to Bitcoin mining, you think that everybody's got it figured out already. Surely all these people spend all their time thinking and playing with Bitcoin miners. They must have figured everything out. Hardly anything's been figured out. The status quo is incredibly easy to challenge. And I mean, this is what I did with the sap heater, right?
Mhm.
I asked even people in these mining groups if they'd ever tried canola oil or if they thought that it was an interesting idea. And most people said that's a terrible idea and you should never do it. And I just did it anyways. And I challenged the status quo and I proved that it could work. And I've still got the S9 hash board soaking in that oil, even though I'm not hashing with it right now, just to see if there's any corrosion or any weirdness that comes from that oil. And even if the oil is degraded, when I fire it up again, if I fry the board, at least I've learned something there, right?
Yeah.
So it's challenge the status quo. And so that's pretty much the breakdown of it. I'll just run through them again real quick. So use the heat or do some work. Denominate your expenses in sats. Use what you have first. Start small and scale up. Measure the power at the wall. Don't be afraid to use third-party firmware. Be willing to customize and tinker with it. Spend this Bitcoin that you mine last. Hold that the longest. If you do spend it, keep the sats local, and then don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. I think I covered all of it.
First, I want to say, like, I love the way that you kind of articulate all of that. You know, the principles of home mining. A lot of people they don't know where to start and they don't know how to get their foot in the door. And what you've kind of broken down there is like you reach out to your local community, and maybe that's actually local, or maybe it's, you know, your friends on Telegram, Twitter, Nostr, whatever it is, and you ask them about the things that you don't know. And what you're doing is you're giving people a really good framework to build their own home mining setup off of. What I really want to hone in on is, because I've got a specific question about this, is the way that you're reusing the sats or circulating those sats back into your local economy. So you go to the local farmers market, correct?
No, actually, I don't.
You
But
don't? Okay.
my Bitcoin meetup is kind of like a farmer's market.
Yeah.
At my local meetup, I can purchase coffee, honey, eggs, pork, dairy products, cheese, yogurt, butter,
Okay. So
all kinds of.
it's like a farmer's market. I guess it's different than what my question was going to be. I was going to ask how Bitcoin has played a role in your local farmer's market, but it sounds more like the Bitcoiners in your area have built their own Bitcoin meetup / farmer's market, where you guys are all kind of doing your own things that produce a quality product that you can then sell for sats. And so what you're doing is you're using Bitcoin to produce sats, but also to produce the product. And then you're taking that product and selling it at the market or at your Bitcoin meetup for sats.
Yeah. So, I mean, people ask, or everyone's like, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was a Bitcoin farmer's market? Or this, I like to call it the Bitcoin bazaar, right? Where everybody in the meetup has the opportunity to bring something that they produce or that they have market access to that the Bitcoiners at that meetup might want. And that's a way to basically dollar cost average. If you don't, to earn Bitcoin, you either buy the stuff and bring it to the meetup with your dollars and then turn the stuff into Bitcoin, because people at a Bitcoin meetup do not want to buy dollars with their Bitcoin.
No.
That's why they have it in the first place. They wanted to get rid of the dollars. So what you need to do is you need to show up with something that they want that isn't dollars, to earn the Bitcoin from them. Yeah, the Bitcoin meetup is the farmer's market. That is the Bitcoin. All you have to do is show up with something and it becomes the farmer's market that is powered by Bitcoin.
It's just a different type of farmer's market. You know, it's Bitcoiners who have decided to build their own farmer's market.
And yeah, and in my case, a lot of the products that I'm producing, the production of them is subsidized by Bitcoin mining. So I'm earning some sats through Bitcoin mining to produce them, and then I'm turning around and I'm selling them to earn more sats when I bring them to the Bitcoin meetup, to the Bitcoin event, whatever. When I market them on Nostr for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I wanna kind of circle around that specifically. You talk about the products that you bring to your own Bitcoin meetup. So I know that you create syrup, maple syrup. And through this process of creating maple syrup, I don't know how the process works. Maybe you can kind of explain to me how the creation of maple syrup works. But I know for a fact that you're using that S9, and I'm curious to know if it's the original S9 that you bought or that you were given by the gentleman that you were just talking about by I forget his Chet. Is it the same? Is it the same S9 that you were using back then, or is it a new one or a different one?
So it's a combination of both, because I started off, I had acquired a second S9. So I guess I can back up and I can just like tell the story. So
yeah, and just real quick for the audio listeners, I am going to be putting just like we're going to be talking about this build that he's done. I've actually got some images showing on the screen, so if you go to YouTube, you can see that on the screen. Anyways, go ahead, Rev.
So I was hashing with this solar power at my yurt with this one single S9, and as soon as wintertime came, the days are short. I don't got a lot of solar power to work with anymore. So I moved it dawned upon me that I could use this S9 as a space heater in my house. And then from there, I realized like, well, it's working pretty good as a space heater. Maybe I can like use it to heat the whole house, help heat the whole house. And so I started working it into my HVAC system. And so I realized one S9 is good, but two S9s would be better. And so I then worked two S9s into my HVAC system. Well, when the wintertime ends, now you've got no more need for the heat in the house. So then the next thing I did was I built a Bitcoin mining food dehydrator, and I also used that S9 for to incubate the lamb that was hypothermic, right? So I was finding other ways to use the heat. This was the beginning of my concept of like, oh, I just need to give my Bitcoin miner a job, and then I can find effective ways to continue to hash. Once you have the equipment, once again, the name of the game is to hash as much as possible in that 4-year time span. But if you don't have a conducive power rate to just plug it in and let it fly, you got to be creative about it, right? So anyways, I had two S9s for this reason. And so I started off with the one S9 was like a J version of it, and the other was just vanilla. So the J version, it was like 75 joules per terahash instead of 100, right? So it's 25% more efficient, quite a bit. So I didn't want to put that in the canola oil and mess with it right away. I used the crappier board first. And then once I got comfortable with this SAPS heater setup, then I switched it into the J and got 25% better efficiency out of that. But in no way was I ready to put like a real full S19 board in there, because I still didn't know yet if I could clean the oil off, if I could reuse these boards after I dunked them in that canola oil. So I guess now I can get into the story about the maple sap heater. Yeah. And this is the favorite thing that I've come up with so far, as far as integrating Bitcoin mining into the heat reuse and at the same time production of a product that I then turn around and sell for Bitcoin. So I make maple syrup at the homestead. Every year I've kind of been doubling the amount of taps that I've got as I learn more about making the maple syrup and expanding the operation. So the previous season I had 65 taps. And this last season, I doubled up to around 120 taps. And so I doubled the amount of production that I was making of sap, but I did not double the amount of equipment that I had to process it. So I found myself at a bottleneck in pre-concentrating the sap before I boiled it off to make it into syrup. And so how I concentrate the sap is I use this large reverse osmosis filter. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm pumping the sap through the filter, and out one tube comes concentrated sap, and the other tube, water is removed. So I'm effectively removing water from the sap before I start to boil it, and this reduces the amount of propane that I have to use by a very significant margin. The problem is that my sap is cold when it goes into that filter, and the filter doesn't work so well with cold fluid. It really wants the fluid to be between 75 and 80 degrees, let's say, somewhere in that range. And so the problem is that I don't want to heat up all 100 gallons of sap I've got before I put it into the filter, because then the sap will spoil. I want to keep that sap at that 38 to 42 degree range. I want to keep it cold. So I had this bottleneck. I've got barrels and barrels of sap stacking up. I cannot push it through this filter fast enough. I'm going to lose my sap and basically waste all my time doubling my production. So I was in a bit of a pinch. I had to figure something out like right now to solve this problem, not, come up with some solution over the next several weeks or whatever. So I quickly realized, like, I've been joking with the guys in those Pleb miner groups about using canola oil as a dielectric fluid, because I was thinking I need to do some immersion Bitcoin mining thing. Like, this is the only way, if I heat up some oil, then I can exchange that heat from the oil into the sap, preheat the sap right before it goes into the filter, and hopefully that solves my problem. So this is where the canola oil comes in. I couldn't get access to BitCool or any of these like fancy dielectric fluids that you're supposed to be using when you put a Bitcoin miner in there to do immersion mining. So I figured I might as well. This is a perfect opportunity to try and use canola oil. I picked up some canola oil and put the board in there and started hashing, and it surprisingly didn't fry or nothing. It worked great. I was actually able to overclock a single S9 board. I think I was able to get over 6 terahash out of one board, which is like insane. You know,
that's pretty good for an S9 board.
Yeah, it's really should only be producing what, like 4 terahash or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was 13 terahash for one S9. So 3 boards, it's about 4.5.
Yeah, something like that. So I was getting a lot more hash out of it. Granted, I was pumping a ton of power into it, but that was what I needed to do in order to get enough heat out of the damn thing to heat up the sap to the 77 to 80 degree range. So anyways, that solved my problem. It basically allowed the filter to not only double the speed in which I could process the sap, but it also concentrated it to a greater degree. So by integrating the Bitcoin miner in there, sure, I was spending some power, some extra electricity, so that my overhead increased on that pre-sap concentration phase. I was getting a rebate in Bitcoin from that, so I was making up some of the power cost. I don't know what percentage exactly anymore it was, but it was not an insignificant percentage of rebate from the Bitcoin I was getting. But now it was actually also saving me propane in the end too. So the propane that I saved likely made up for almost as much as the electricity I was putting into it anyways. So this like supercharged my maple sugaring operation. And then I made about 14 gallons of syrup. I just sold all of it. I mean, I just sold out of it. And you know, most of that syrup was sold for Bitcoin. And so now I've used a Bitcoin miner to help me make a product more efficiently and effectively. So I reduced my overhead, made the cost of producing that product cheaper, and then I was able to turn around and earn sats with it as well. And a lot of those sats were just sharing that syrup and selling that syrup to people in my local Bitcoin community at my meetup, helping to build the circular economy in my area, participate in the culture and community of Bitcoin, and just overall improve the Bitcoin network that we've got going on right here in Michigan.
Yeah, this is an incredible story of not only your own ingenuity, but just like how Bitcoin can play a role, because it's not just Bitcoin as in the savings technology, but it's also Bitcoin in the actual like heating technology itself. You're using that heat in a way to make the process that you're already doing this process. You're already going to take the maple syrup, the maple sap, and turn it into syrup. But now you're able to make that syrup faster, more efficiently. You can make more of it because, like you said, you've already doubled the intake process, and now you're able to turn around and sell that syrup at a Bitcoin meetup. And I'm sure that the Bitcoiners are like, we're all nerds. So it's like, as soon as we find out something's made with Bitcoin, we're like, okay, I want more of that. So you probably sold out just for that reason alone.
People do love to hear that the products that they're getting have been touched by Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. I mean, it just makes sense, right? Bitcoin, yeah. if you're going to a Bitcoin meetup and you're looking to spend your sats and really participate and not just hodl and look for purchasing power increases, but really you're in it for the freedom technology, the sovereignty, and all of the utility that you get from holding and using Bitcoin. You get really excited by somebody that's also participating in the degree that you are. And so once again, Bitcoin is like a border of a culture, in my opinion. And so I'm trying to operate within that border as much as possible. And I think the others that are doing the same really do appreciate it when they know that the products, the goods, and the services are also touched by Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining and come from somebody who's as dedicated to that culture as them.
Yeah. You know, I can't really say whether this will happen or won't happen. I've only been in Bitcoin for about 2 years, and I've only been playing around with mining for about 7-8 months. So really my education and my intellect on this particular topic isn't as high as I'd like it to be. So what I'm saying could be just me speaking out my ass and into the ether. But I really do think that over time, more businesses, small time people, just, not industrial scale, not, commercial scale, but just small businesses will start implementing Bitcoin mining into their own processes, because they realize that, just like what you've done, they're going to realize that they can make their process more efficient. I heard a story from a gentleman who lives in Southern Oregon, who, they build all these greenhouses, and they use these greenhouses to grow all kinds of vegetables and other types of produce for the local economy down there. But what they have to do is they have to put these oil heaters on the walls to radiate heat inward. And what that does is it helps the produce grow more efficiently, more effectively. It has the right climate. And I'm thinking, well, that process of heating up that oil could be done with a Bitcoin miner, which would reduce the cost of electricity and also collect some sats at the end of it. And when more people like that start to realize that, hey, I can make my business more profitable, I can bring in more revenue because I'm not expending so much on my capex, all of a sudden it's like this light bulb that goes off. It's like, okay, well, how much is the infrastructure to build this system, and what does that process look like? And I can't say whether or not that's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, but I do believe that that's kind of where the home mining aspect and all these principles of mining is going to lead to eventually, because you've got people like yourself who, yeah, you're doing it for your own home and your own local economy, but eventually there's going to be other people who decide, like, I want to do this on a larger scale. What is it going to take for me to do that larger scale, and how can I implement this process?
I think, and that kind of brings up something that I've been thinking about lately too, in regards to there's so much low-hanging fruit for some big company to build a Bitcoin mining water heater, let's say, or a Bitcoin mining greenhouse heater. And this goes back to a little bit to the fact that these Bitcoin miners are not designed to integrate into these kinds of systems. So you're going to have to redesign that Bitcoin miner from the ground up to be manufactured in this scale, versus if you are somebody who can just create and tinker and whip together your own system, there's a huge advantage you can have right now over your competition by having the willingness to do it yourself, integrate Bitcoin mining into your greenhouse heating, into your maple syrup production, into whatever it is. But if Bitcoin plays out the way I think about what Bitcoin's going to do as it grows in popularity, adoption, and actual mainstream use, I think that Bitcoin, not only is it a decentralized network, but it also is a decentralizing force. It creates incentives for decentralization in general amongst, this is a perfect example with the Bitcoin meetups and how the Bitcoin farmers market is the Bitcoin meetup, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea is that I think that instead of Bitcoin mining being more and more centralized, and there's a lot of talk about the problems and issues with the centralization of the mining pools and everything right now, these kinds of use cases will just further there's going to be a lot of people producing a lot of these products themselves, right? The BitX is a great example of that, right? So there's the open source little mini Bitcoin miner, the BitX, which is just one S19 chip of whatever flavor on a open source board. You can kind of, if you have some ingenuity and technical expertise, you can build one yourself. But anybody can build these things and sell them, right? And so, like, let's say I released some plans for my Bitcoin mining food dehydrator. Okay, now anyone can build that box and then attach the Bitcoin miners that they've sourced from themselves into that and sell those. Like, I can't stop anybody from designing a Bitcoin mining food dehydrator and selling that. And so hopefully I'm making a point here is, like, I don't think there's going to be a company that corners the market on Bitcoin mining water heaters. I think right. in the end, it's going to be a local pleb who figures out how to convert water heaters into Bitcoin miners, and then they're going to go to their Bitcoin meetup and say, hey, I can convert your water heater. You want to pay me to come over and do that for you? And then they'll offer the support and maintenance to their local community. And in this sense, these Bitcoin mining integrations will be decentralized because it will come from the people in the local communities who are supporting people to do so.
I I completely agree with that. We've had a couple of different people on the show. Dane from Hash Rate House has come on and he's talked about how a water heater would be made. But we've also talked with Cade Peterson from Softworm LLC, and he's up in Idaho. He's actually building integrated immersion systems for local businesses, for people in the area. And something similar that they've all been kind of talking about is this fact that at the end of the day, you could build a company or a corporation that does this stuff, but you still need boots on the ground, people that are hands on, who can go in and fix these products or install these products or diagnose problems or things like that. So what you're talking about is this decentralization aspect of, maybe it's not one huge corporation, but maybe it's like 150 different people who have built a small business that's just sustainable for their own life. And they're using that small business to integrate these systems into people's homes. And these people, maybe they don't understand what Bitcoin is, but they do see the use case for making their lives easier. And so I agree with you. It's all part of that decentralization aspect of building and iterating and coming together on a large scale, but individuals coming together on a large scale.
Yeah, I think that you definitely clarified my point.
Yeah.
That a big centralized company, it's just very difficult to go. You just need to be sort of integrated in with your community and the customers that you have in a close way, because this stuff is so new. And I think it comes up a lot, like, oh, what happens when there's maintenance that needs to be had, or that you need to do an upgrade or whatever it might be. It's hard to do that at scale. And it's a lot easier for, like you're saying, one guy to just make it his local business, and I'm just the Bitcoin mining appliance guy, and I'll like make your Bitcoin mining appliance and hook your house up and build your central boiler or whatever it might be. And so the other thing that, and to go back to the idea of this centralization of mining pools and the centralization of Bitcoin mining, I think, and I believe this, I am not concerned. And I might get a little backlash from having this opinion, but I'm not concerned about the centralization of the mining pools as long as the hash rate is further continuing to decentralize. As soon as a pool that is like Ant Pool that's making the block template for everyone else, as soon as they don't play by the rules of the game very nice and cause some problems, I have a feeling that hash rate is going to go scattering off to somewhere else, and there's other places to go. I mean, obviously there's Ocean Pool now, so all the hash rate could just go to Ocean Pool, whatever. It's not hard for people to move the hash rate, and certainly there's these large miners that are under contract, and they might not be able to move the hash rate. But the point is that if the hash rate is decentralized in the hands of the plebs, now we've got control and some say in the matter too, and we can point our hash rate where we think it's appropriate. And so, and this, and to add to that, so even if you have, this is why I think it's important to just own hash in general. Even if you can't afford to necessarily hash it all the time, having a Bitcoin miner just to use in the wintertime, if you're in a climate that's conducive to have a space heater, now you've got some hash sitting there ready to deploy in case the network needs you. If everybody's got a little space heater and anywhere from 10 to 100 terahash just sitting around, and should the network need us to fire that up, regardless of the cost, because once again, all my financial capital is riding on Bitcoin, and so I am going to do everything that I can, should the network be at risk, to protect my investment, to protect my financial capital. So I think it's important to own some hash, to run the node, to participate in this maximally, because I got a lot riding on it. And so if a lot of other people are thinking the same and operating the same way, we've got some certainly more strength than should we rely on somebody else to do the hashing for us, right?
Yeah. What comes to mind, and I think I've mentioned this before on the show, but what comes to mind is that scene from Bug's Life. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but like there's all the grasshoppers are standing around in this bar, and they've got all the seeds in the hopper, and they're talking about how, like, if one person stands up, they can squash them, but if everyone stands up, it's almost impossible. And what I see here is this idea that, like, everybody who is applying their own knowledge, their own foundational information to the products in their life, the systems in their life, they're adding this hash rate to their life. All of a sudden, when we all come together and we're all doing that, Yeah, sure. We're not going to be able to compete on an individual level with these giant pubcos. But what we're doing is we're decentralizing the space. We're making Bitcoin stronger, and we're also strengthening our own life, our own situations. And really, at the end of the day, all people want, like, I maybe this is wrong, but I believe that all people want is just that sustainability to live a life that is wholesome, holistic, and honest. Yeah, everybody's chasing number go up. Everybody's chasing this idea that Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million. But what does that do for your life? And if you can live a more holistic life, like such as the life that you're living right now, because I'm sure you're probably at a point where number go up doesn't really matter to you because you're already living the life that you want to live. Um, a lot of people just need to realize that they can live that life that they want if they just start making progress towards it now, instead of just like, oh well, I'm not going to have it tomorrow, so I guess I might as well not try. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not.
Or yeah, I mean, I call it buying. Well, when I took the journey into homesteading, I told everyone I was buying my way out of society, right? I wanted to leave the normal society that I was participating in and just do my own thing. And it required me to work really hard to save up, to have that capital, and I had to cash in some of my material capital in order to accomplish that as well. Um, and then from there, once I did buy my way out, a whole new door was open of rebuilding everything, from the ground up over again.
Yeah.
So certainly the number go up if you're hodling your Bitcoin and you want to wait till that time where you can finally pull the trigger and buy your way out of society. There's nothing wrong with that. But like you're saying, you can also start taking the steps now to prepare yourself. And this is something that I wish I had done a little bit. I'd done a better job of, because like I said, when I did finally buy my way out, I was like, okay, I'm here. Like sort of that idea of Plato's allegory of the cave. When you get out of the cave and you see the light and everything looks like a freaking alien world to you, and what do? I was lost, and it took years to get on my feet again and to actually get some momentum and some forward trajectory. So you can do both. You can hodl your stack, but you can also participate in Bitcoin in your meetup, spend your Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, participate in no KYC Bitcoin. I think if you can find a way to get away from, like, in my opinion, participating in KYC Bitcoin is like participating in the fiat system, right? If we're trying to crush the fiat system and build a better system out of Bitcoin, then getting rid of the KYC aspect of Bitcoin in your participation is going to improve that possibility for us, right? For us as Bitcoiners, as a culture and community of Bitcoin, the more we can get away from participating in the KYC aspect of Bitcoin, the more sovereignty and freedom we're going to have as Bitcoiners in a culture and community.
Yeah, it's that whole thought process of vote with your money, not with your voice kind of thing, because nobody listens to you. Whether you agree with this or not, when you vote for a presidential candidate or for whatever it is, you can't really say whether or not your voice is making change. But when you vote with your money by opting out of the fiat system and into a KYC free version of sat stacking and product building, you're voting with your money and your time, which are the two most valuable things that you have. And all of a sudden you're going to start living that life that you want to live. And other people are going to see that, and they're going to want to start asking questions and seeing how they can live that life too. And that's kind of how that needle moves from 0 to 60 in the scale of saying fuck you to the fiat system and building the Bitcoin economy.
Yeah, by acquiring Bitcoin KYC free, you're necessarily forced to participate in the network more. Because how are you going to do it? You're going to either get the KYC Bitcoin through mining it. When you're mining Bitcoin, you're participating in the network. Whether you point to Antpool or not, and whether you agree with the centralization of mining pools or not, you're still participating a hell of a lot more than if you're just buying Bitcoin on an exchange or on, Fold or whatever.
Yeah.
The other thing is when you start to try and and let's say you're not mining Bitcoin. Let's say you're trying to acquire Bitcoin in cash buys at a meetup or earn it, right? whatever you're doing, you're putting yourself in front of your local Bitcoin community. And when I say local, this could also mean, as you mentioned before, a group of people that you're communicating with and cooperating with on Telegram, on Nostr, on Twitter, whatever it might be. This is a local community, so to speak, in your sense of in your from your perspective, right? So you're participating with these people instead of being isolated. Because once again, Bitcoin, in my opinion, is not just a monetary asset, a monetary technology. It's the facilitation of the development of a new culture, a new system. And so by participating in the system, that's how it gets built. There's no hyper Bitcoinization that can happen without people actually participating in the effect of that.
Yeah. I love the way that you put that. I love the way that you kind of explain that. My biggest fear for Bitcoin is that, you've got all these people who are seeing Bitcoin as number go up technology, which is cool because everybody comes to Bitcoin through that lens. But what scares me the most is that there's going to be people who are perfectly fine with obfuscating responsibility to large government, to all these different systematic controls. And because of that, they're not going to take the dive down the rabbit hole, which kind of shows them all of the failures, all of the misgivings that fiat system has. And so, the more people that you have coming into Bitcoin who aren't doing that work that's necessary, they're just going to be living that, oh, I'm going to buy Bitcoin on an exchange and just hold it KYC'd, all this stuff. Like that for me is what I think is going to be the biggest hurdle that we need to get over, is teaching people how to hold it, how to secure it, how to hold their own keys, and then also teaching them the difference between the fiat Bitcoin system and the Bitcoin system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's going to be something that's going to shock a lot of people into too little, too late type of attitude, right? I wish I would have started figuring this out sooner because now I'm getting squeezed. But once that squeeze comes, and who knows how it's going to happen, a lot more people are going to recognize the importance of not participating in KYC Bitcoin, using self-custody, all of these things, right? But they're also going to probably find out too, the people that are just hodling for number go up, that you can't eat your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that kind of diversifying, spending your Bitcoin to diversify yourself into these, and I talk about this a lot, this concept of the 8 forms of capital, sacrificing a little bit of your Bitcoin, a little bit of the purchasing power, a little bit of the gains that you have from participating in Bitcoin into material capital that will help build a business that you can help earn, that you can now earn some Bitcoin with, into cultural capital by participating in your meetup, giving to the meetup somehow, some way, social capital, helping other Bitcoiners, developing friendships and relationships with them, giving to them, diversifying into living capital. And this is developing some sort of food production systems, or access to somebody who is producing food and cooperating with them by spending your sats with them, right? All of these things will help to build a resilient local Bitcoin culture and community that you will now have access to. So when the squeeze comes and you've got Bitcoin, you've got way more utility for that Bitcoin than somebody who's just isolated and hodling for number go up. The purchasing power increase doesn't matter if you have no way to spend it or participate with other people and get what you need. You can't access the actual utility of the Bitcoin without participating in the culture and community.
Yeah, people, Bitcoiners, ourselves, plebs, whatever you want to call it, like, we really need to start taking more responsibility. And you're obviously already doing that. You're participating in your local Bitcoin economy. You're participating in your local meetups. You're building products for yourself, not actually products to sell, but products for yourself that help implement Bitcoin into the systems, which are allowing you to create, an actual product to sell to your Bitcoin economy or your Bitcoin meetup. And what more people need to do is they need to start taking their own education, their own intellectual capital, as you call it, and start applying that to the Bitcoin ecosystem, because that's how they start building up the social capital and all these other things that allow them to live a better life. But also, when the inevitable happens and that squeeze comes, all of a sudden they have the off ramp or the way to get out of that system, because they've already built up the economy around them. And I think that that's what more people need to do, is just dive in, guys. You know, to the audience, you're listening to this, like, if you don't know how to get started, join some Telegram group chats. I'm actually going to put the Loki chat in the description of this video, and I'll probably add a couple other chats as well, like the Home Mining Wizards, and Scott offered, we have some chats as well. But these are great places to meet people. Real quick, another great place to meet people, I want to talk about our mining conference. Our mining conference, which will happen in September, is a great place for you to meet other like-minded individuals, whether on a pleb scale or an industrial scale. So get ready to dive headfirst into the future of Bitcoin mining at the mining conference fall 2024, presented by Bitcoin Mining World. Join us in the heart of central Minnesota this fall for an electrifying event that promises to revolutionize your approach to mining. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur, a passionate enthusiast, or a curious investor, this conference is tailor-made for you. You picture this: a breathtaking 25 megawatt mining farm awaits your exploration, offering a hands-on experience like no other. Immerse yourself in the world of mining with workshops, keynotes, and events led by industry titans, the visionary Jonathan Yagubian, the esteemed Jael Zolecker, and also known as the Beard Miner, and our very own Scott Offord. Scott Offord is a seasoned Bitcoin mining educator and equipment broker known for his Build a Mine Bootcamp and MasterMINED Club programs. He will share his expertise in fostering a supportive Bitcoin community, learn how to build networks where sharing and caring are paramount, gain insights into construction and managing Bitcoin mining farms effectively and efficiently. At the mining conference, you'll unlock exclusive insights, forge valuable connections, and explore the limitless potential of the Bitcoin mining industry. Alongside the conference, participants have the exclusive chance to snag tickets to a one-day Build-A-Mine crash course event set to take place the day before the conference. This one-day boot camp is perfect opportunity for conference attendees to seize a huge discount and participate in the Build-A-Mine boot camp at just 1/5 of the price of a normal 3-day boot camp. Mark your calendars, stack those sats, and join us for an unforgettable experience this fall in beautiful Minnesota. Don't miss your chance to be part of history in the making. Secure your spot today and take your mining game to new heights at the mining conference. So I wanted to talk about this specifically because I think that building up community is very important in the Bitcoin space. The mining conference, your Bitcoin meetup, you know, local Bitcoin economies are very important to building up this actual the community capital. I don't know, I can't remember exactly what you called it, but the social capital around you. These are great places to do this, because being that lone Bitcoiner in your area, like myself, I don't really know that many Bitcoiners in my area. It's hard. It's difficult. You don't know where to begin. But when you kind of branch out and find these groups, you can start learning how other people are doing it. And we talked in the very beginning of this episode how you don't know what you don't know. And so you need to reach out to other people who have done this to hold your hand. And I think that these are great opportunities. I just kind of want to hear your thoughts a little bit on how the Bitcoin meetups in your area, the Grand Rapids meetup, these kinds of things have helped you specifically to, you know, gain that knowledge and build the systems that you're building.
Well, so the way it feels to me, I don't have to wait for the current systems to crumble and collapse to transition over to a new one. I call it kind of like soft working society, you could say, where at these meetups, we're building this community, this culture around Bitcoin, defined by Bitcoin, but we're following all the rules, all the current laws, regulations, all the shit that the current fiat system has. But what we're doing is we're not waiting for it to collapse to get started. We're starting now, and we're building our resilience amongst each other. And so, I just went to my local meetup here in Southwest Michigan a few nights ago on Thursday, and this came up at the meetup. It's like, hey, when the system crumbles around us, should it happen quickly or slowly, whatever, as it's going away, and surely it will. Who knows when and how long it will take? But when it does, we're already like good. We're already set up. We are already cooperating with each other. We can, I mean, we're not at the scale yet to where like you could totally feed your family. Everyone at the meetup could feed their family from trading with each other for the food at there, but we're certainly year by year, month by month, whatever it might be, every time there's a meetup, there's more things available there. There's more people that show up. There's more people that get integrated. It's growing, and we're working to grow that because we want Bitcoin to succeed, and we're interested in the culture and community of Bitcoin. So the point is that you don't have to wait for fiat to crumble and collapse to get started. You can soft fork your way into the Bitcoin culture and community right now, and do that by either starting a meetup if you don't got one locally. You can find meetups. There are a number of different ways. Orange Pill app is a good way to do it. The Oshi app, I think, also has little pins on there where Bitcoin meetups are. There's BTC map. I'm sure that there's Bitcoin meetups listed on there. Obviously, meetup.com. And then, like you were saying, Telegram, Nostr, Twitter, all these places. If you just go out there and like tag Ask Nostr, how do I find a Bitcoin meetup? Or I'm in this area. Is there a Bitcoin meetup around me? Someone's going to probably say yes or no and show you where the closest one is. And here's a good example of this too. So when I host all these guests, I have hundreds of people that come stay with me every year. And I give tours to the guests of my homestead. I talk about how I've integrated Bitcoin as a lifestyle, not just as number go up technology. Talk about the meetups. I talk about the mining. I talk about the earning, all this stuff, right? And come to find out, most of these people at this point have heard about Bitcoin, have even probably owned some, have touched it in some way, and a lot of them still actually have some. But they don't know how to use it, and they don't know how to get the utility out of it. And so the best thing that I can do, and I no longer recommend people, download this wallet or do this thing, what I do is I recommend they go to the Bitcoin meetup. I'm like, you would really enjoy your local Bitcoin meetup. And I ask where they're from, and I do the work for them. I search it up, and I send them a link to wherever the closest Bitcoin meetup is to them. And I haven't heard back from anyone that's actually gone out and went, but I do this effort. I make this effort because I think it's important to expose people to the fact that Bitcoin is a culture beyond just a monetary technology.
Yes, I have said this multiple times. Bitcoin is less of a technology and more of an ecosystem. It's a bunch of different things, bunch of different aspects coming together to create this one whole thing that we call Bitcoin. You're talking specifically about community and getting people to branch out and reach out so that when the inevitable happens, because I do believe that inevitable squeeze, that crash, it's coming. Whenever it happens, whether it's in my lifetime or my son's lifetime, like, it's coming. So how you prepare today will strengthen your situation tomorrow. And so I really think that it's most important, like you said, to start reaching out to your community and growing the area around you so that you can strengthen your own city, town, locality. It's very important, and I fail on a lot of that as well because I haven't gone to a single Bitcoin meetup yet. I blame it mostly on time. I don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm gonna do it. And if anybody wants to kind of like explore that as well, I do implore you, go to the Orange Pill app, meetup.com, the great places, and then like Rev said, Ask Nostr, type it in. You're going to be able to find people who are in your area who are willing to talk to you. I mean, the greatest thing about Bitcoiners, this is my favorite thing about Bitcoiners, is that I can reach out to someone like you, Rev, and say, hey, I don't know anything about this. Can you tell me more about it? And you're more than willing to sit down with me for an hour and a half to talk about whatever it is that we're kind of coming together on. And I think more people need to think about like, hey, there's people out there that are willing to talk to you. You just have to be willing to ask the questions.
And to your point on like, it's hard to find time to do all of these things, right? And somebody might have more of a desire or an interest in one thing over another, right? Let's say you don't have a homestead and you don't have all this usage for Bitcoin mining. Well, you could get one of those Apollo nodes, and that has a miner built into it, and now you're running a node and you're mining some Bitcoin in your office and your apartment or your homeowners association, or wherever you might be. And to the point of like, well, I don't have time to go to the Bitcoin meetup or start one. It's like, if you just hold that intention in your mind that eventually I'll get to it, Eventually I will run a node. Eventually I will get an S9 and plug it in. Eventually, and you just keep taking steps towards it, thinking about it, planning for it. This is important. That's how you get there. You know, you have to be just thinking about it, wanting to do it. There's so Joel Salatin, he's more of this permaculture, regenerative agriculture, food production guy. Wrote a lot of books about that, how to make money raising chickens, for example. But a saying that he's got is, if you want it, you really got to want it. You know, it's simple as that. Like, if you want to participate in Bitcoin and you really believe in Bitcoin, you really got to want it to take the next step, to do that little extra thing, to start a meetup, to mine some Bitcoin, to run a node, whatever it might be, to start trying to make the effort to acquire the Bitcoin you're getting without KYC. All of these steps, you just got to want to do it. And there's surprisingly a small number of people that are willing to do this, but we're very dedicated. And once again, when we get together, it's powerful. You're going to get more out of more utility for your Bitcoin. Once again, you can't eat your Bitcoin, but if you hang out with your Bitcoiners, you're going to get fed, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think I've kept you for long enough. This has been a very good episode. I really enjoyed it. But before we end out on this, I do want to ask you a couple philosophical questions, because I think this kind of really gets to the heart of why we build in Bitcoin. So my first question is, what are your thoughts on the future of Bitcoin mining?
So I think we're going to be watching the hash rate ebb and flow as the seasons change throughout the planet, as the sun moves around. Well, you might be able to watch the hash rate spike up, no matter based on what part of the country's got the sun shining on, or what part of the world's got the sun shining at any point in time. The point is that I think the future of Bitcoin mining is tapping into the natural energy flows of the planet. Ultimately, that's where it's headed. There's no way that these large-scale mining facilities are going to be able to maintain competitiveness as the reward gets cut in half, and it's going to be driving the hash rate into these more natural forms of energy. Now, there's probably always going to be a place for Bitcoin mining to load balance a nuclear power plant, or to load balance a giant hydro dam, or whatever it might be. But more so than that, I think that where Bitcoin mining is going to shine is going to be in these natural forms of energy. And when you take that down to the pleb scale, that means that we've got, and I might be just speaking for myself here, but I've got a huge incentive to develop more power production here at my homestead. I'm working into more and more solar power production. I'm always going to have a use case for that solar power now that I've got some hash rate, right? And I might even try and get 50 watts out of my creek that's flowing by my house, just because if I can tap that energy flow, that 50 watts adds up to a lot of sats over the long haul, and capture some wind. Maybe start taking some of the excess carbon biomass that I'm producing here from the prunings of my trees, from the manures that I'm not using to fertilize my ground, and turn that into power. You might see the idea here is that if there's a way to produce electricity with a natural form, ultimately driven by the sunlight, or through water flowing and gravity and so on and so forth, I think that there's going to be a Bitcoin miner hashing off of the excess of that if it's not going to be able to be used for some productive other application.
There's an abundance of energy around us. There's this FUD that, energy is finite, that you can only produce so much. And that's a lie. It's something that we've been kind of psyoped into believing as a culture, as in a community. But there's energy abundance all around. It's just finding ways, like you said, to harness that energy.
And now the ASICs exist, man. They're out there. And if they're not hashing, they're looking for a way to do so. Somebody is going to figure out a way to get those cheap old S9s doing something, Yeah. And so that's what the future is going to be. And in addition to that, also this intermediate stage, like that's the ultimate end goal, right? But I think intermediate, they're like every maple syrup producer, if they're using electricity to preheat their maple sap, because these are reverse osmosis systems do use electricity to heat the sap, right? I didn't invent that or anything. It was just something that people do. I just used a Bitcoin miner to do it. And so I think what we talked about a little bit, once these industries that fit into that low grade heat use case realize how effective Bitcoin mining is to accomplish that, it's gonna, the people that like I said, figure out how to DIY it into their operation first are going to be way more competitive. And also, I didn't talk about this, but when you start selling your products for Bitcoin and earning Bitcoin, and you have some let's say runway before you have to actually liquidate those sats, I like to think about the sats that I earn. Each UTXO is on like a conveyor belt headed towards me having to liquidate it to access the purchasing power, right? And right now my conveyor belt's pretty darn long. So the sats that I earn, I probably am not going to have to liquidate those for a long time. And so by the time I do, the purchasing power of that UTXO has gone up a lot. And so if you're a business and you start to build up a treasury or whatever, you're storing your financial capital in Bitcoin, you're going to be way more profitable than another a competitor who's doing the same thing as you. So once you start to integrate earning Bitcoin, you integrate Bitcoin mining into the operation to subsidize your overhead to make your costs more competitive, and then you start to earn the Bitcoin by selling the product for Bitcoin, it's going to be a no-brainer. I mean, the companies that start doing this are going to shine. If they start doing it now, 4 years later, everyone's going to be like, I can't believe how successful they are.
Yeah.
You know, I just this is my opinion, right? There's no way to prove that, or I don't have a crystal ball or anything, but I'm very confident of it. And I'm trying to live that example myself.
Yeah. And I mean, eventually it's going to be you've built this process, and maybe somebody sees that you've built this process and they wonder, okay, well, how can I build a business from that? And then they might come to you and ask you like, hey, I need help building this so that I can design a product and a process that can be a sustainable business. And that's kind of where you come in as the guy who's done it. You've gone through the trial by fire. You've figured out the process, the most efficient way to do it. And so now you could, value trade your time and your energy for sats to teach this other person how they could use it, or you'd help them, whatever it is. But it's people like you who have put the time in, the effort in to build the process, showing other people who are more business oriented how they can do it. And it's just kind of like this rolling snowball that gains traction and momentum over time. I don't see it being something that like we wake up a year from now and every business has integrated Bitcoin mining in one way, shape, or form in the heat reuse. I think it's going to be a lot longer before you see that. But eventually, and again, I don't have a crystal ball either, but I do think that that's where this is heading. So that's what I think the future of Bitcoin mining looks like. And I appreciate your very value additive answer for that, because it helps people understand where Bitcoiners are kind of thinking, like the lines along that we're thinking. The last question I have for you, and this is my favorite question to ask everybody, because it just gets at the heart of why we're here, why we do Bitcoin, why we invest our time, our energy, our resources into Bitcoin. So, Rev, what does Bitcoin mean to you?
Well, I've got a saying. As you know, we've talked about permaculture a little bit on the show. And so permaculture has 3 ethics: earth care, people care, and non-extraction. And the whole goal of permaculture is to create a permanent culture. But when I say permanent culture, I don't mean like an ossified, unchanging culture, more so a culture that's resilient enough to withstand any catastrophe or mistake that might happen through our own dumb human error, right? So we will not be able to destroy ourselves through our ignorance. And to me, that permanent culture requires permanent money. And I think Bitcoin is that permanent money. So I've got this saying that goes permanent culture, permanent money. And so to me, Bitcoin it's the facilitator. Both permaculture and Bitcoin are the antidote to fiat. The fiat system is the most extractive system we can observe today. In my opinion, it's it's the most extractive, right? And Bitcoin and permaculture are these antidotes which, instead of extracting from the future, they're building capital for the future to become resilient, to build this permanent culture.
All right, that's beautiful. Honestly, it's the way, it's the antidote to that fiat corruption, man. That's what Bitcoin is. Well,
Exactly.
so Rev, I really appreciate your time today. I think this is one of my favorite episodes, just simply because like we talked about a lot of things that I'm super interested in, and I hope that the audience also finds it super interesting. So I want to take the time to say thank you, and that I really appreciate you spending time with me today.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll do a little shill for right here at the end if you let me.
No, please do. Please tell everybody where they can find you. Shill anything that you want.
I've got this class coming up on October 12th. It's applied permaculture, so it'll be talking about this permanent culture, how to achieve this, how to use the principles of permaculture and apply it to your life, not just in homesteading, but if it's in a business or whatever else. And there'll be more information about that you can find on Nostr. You can just, I guess, search applied I don't know. You'll find it on Nostr. Okay.
Yeah, I'll make sure to share your NPub in the description and try to link to everything as well. Yeah,
Nostr's a little bit tricky because it's hard to like search on there. You kind of got to just follow me, and then you'll find it if you get in touch with me, right? Okay. Yeah. So, and then the other thing is I do the first Wednesday of every month I do a permaculture live stream at 8 p.m. and I talk about mining, growing stuff, food forests, all these different aspects of homesteading and permaculture that I'm doing. And this coming one in September, I'll be talking about my cannabis production, how I produce the cannabis with pretty much zero inputs, and as well as like use Bitcoin mining to do so, and so on and so forth, how I've integrated Bitcoin mining and the rabbits and everything into this cannabis production. So those are the two things. Yeah, get out there and go to your local Bitcoin meetup and participate, man. Everybody out there listening, and get some hash, and just even if it's just to have it on the sidelines waiting for winter time to use it as space heater. It's important to have some hash, I think. If you're already running a node and doing everything else, get a little bit of hash there, sitting and waiting, so we have some firepower should things get weird.
Absolutely. I first off, I want to say, if you guys do, go to Rev's Nostr page and find the Wednesday permaculture conversation. I try to be in those conversations too. I've only been to one so far because timing just didn't work out, but I try to get in there as well because it's a great way to learn more. Like we talked about in the very beginning of this episode, you don't know what you don't know, so you have to start taking steps to learn it. And Rev really breaks everything down and like teaches you. And so you also have the ability to ask questions. So join us there. I'll be there as many times as I can join, and it's a great opportunity. And then for, gaining hash rate, a lot of people, like a lot of the new Bitcoiners, the new coiners, they don't know where to buy these machines. Look, I'm not trying to shill everything that we're doing here at Bitcoin Mining World, but I know an easy way to get a hold of S9s. I know how to get a hold of S19s. I can get you in contact with some people who can give you the best price on these machines. You don't just have to go to buy them through eBay or whatever, but there's also these Telegram communities. You can find people on there that have these old machines just lying around, and they'll sell it to you for a lot cheaper than you'd go and buy them through like Bitmain or these businesses that have built it off of selling these machines. So reach out, make sure that you're finding the cheapest hash you can possibly get, because we'll help you do that. Rev, is there anything else you want to say before we close out?
I just want to that point of finding some hash cheap on Telegram and everything. You do have to be very careful of impersonators, scammers, and whatnot. It's probably better, in my opinion, to go through somebody who's got some reputation built up. That I can say a few names here, like Racks, Altair Tech. These are great places to get Bitcoin miners. I don't know if Scott sells miners.
We sell everything, man.
So Scott is around. I mean, he'll get you some hash too. These places like that are probably much better than Amazon, eBay, you really gotta, if you're gonna buy a Bitcoin miner on Telegram, you gotta really find your way into knowing those people. You gotta be very careful buying a Bitcoin miner on Telegram.
There are a lot of scammers in the space, and you got to be really careful. Like Rev said, it's a dangerous place out there on the internet, so be careful.
And honestly, if you go to a Bitcoin meetup, I just gave an S9 to a guy who was interested. We call it hash the torch. John from Untitled Misfits coined that term, where if somebody's, and typically people have an S9 that they're not really using anymore, they're willing to let somebody borrow it to learn. So if you need access to a Bitcoin miner just to try things out, you probably can find one at your local meetup. And honestly, there's a lot of reputation that people are trying to build in these meetups, especially the smaller ones. So it's unlikely that you're going to go to a meetup and get scammed by somebody there, especially if you go a few times and build up some rapport with these people first. You can be pretty confident that you can get access to some hash that way as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. So, well, I'll make sure everything gets linked in the description. Rev, again, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I think that, we'll have to get you back on to dive a little bit more into the products that you're building. Maybe, later down in the future, maybe we'll get you on for a winter episode and we can do some video footage of what you're actually building. But guys, this has been the Build a Mine podcast. As always, if you liked the show, please comment, like, subscribe, share it out. We're trying to get the signal out there. Find us on Fountain. The biggest boosts we always shout you guys out. And eventually I am going to be trying to do a giveaway where we give away some kind of machine. So if you want to get some free hash rate in that way, just send us some boosts and we'll make sure that happens. But yeah, this was the Build a Mine podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will catch you guys later.
Please note, the Build a Mine podcast provides information for general educational purposes only. This information should not be construed as legal, financial, or investment advice. We do not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information presented, and we encourage you to consult with a professional advisor, legal advisor, and/or financial advisor before making any financial decisions. The Build a Mine podcast and its affiliates are not responsible for any losses incurred as a result of using the information provided.